please, ladies and gentlemen. That's probably what you're trying to do. I definitely feel like an angry school teacher. John said I was giving up an angry school teacher vibe. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you hear me at the back now? Okay. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Just to get some of the housekeeping stuff out of the way, there's no fire drill expected this afternoon. Toilets, just come and go as you please. Don't have to ask my permission if you're paying the teacher for the afternoon. If there is an alarm that goes off, then exits through that door, mainly that one, and then you go out around the left and someone will direct you to the car park around that area, which is where we currently congregate. So thank you very much for joining us this afternoon. We're really fantastic attendance. My name is David Powles and I'm CEO of the Norfolk Community Law Service, and I'm your host for this afternoon's event. Thank you for being here today for the West Norfolk launch of something truly important, an initiative that aims to help address a growing issue in our community, poverty. You will hear more about the Alliance, why it has been launched, and what it hopes to achieve later on from Ruth Stokes, one of our guest speakers tonight. However, from my perspective, the reason is simple but urgent. Too many people in Norfolk are going without life's essentials: food on the table, a roof over their heads, a warm, dry home, a comfortable bed to sleep in. These are basic human needs, yet for far too many people they are out of reach. The Alliance is a movement for everyone who believes we can and must do better. We hope that it will become a coalition of organisations, including charities, social enterprises, faith groups, community groups, food banks, statutory partners and individuals united in tackling poverty in Norfolk. We know there are plenty of organisations across the county who all do wonderful work to help people in need where they live. The Alliance isn't about trying to replace or replicate that work. What it is about is trying to bring it all together, to make sure we share problems and solutions, good practice and bad, to make sure we campaign together for the things that really matter, to try and ensure we are one voice for the good of the people of this amazing county. Together we are stronger, and together we hope to work towards solutions that make a difference. If just one good idea or solution comes from events like this, then the Alliance will have been worthwhile. At the very least, we can use it as a mechanism to ensure that poverty and anti-poverty initiatives are at the top of the agenda for local councils, health organisations, MPs and all the decision makers locally and nationally. The Norfolk Anti-Poverty Alliance is about working together across sectors, across communities and across political lines to build a Norfolk where no one is left behind. Events like tonight are the start of it, and we look forward to hearing from our guest panellists before opening out the debate to you guys for questions and comments. Thank you again for being part of today. We've had a fantastic response to this event. We hope you find it inspiring and informative. Please have a think about any questions you may have for any of our esteemed panellists this evening. We look forward to working with all of you to tackle poverty and make Norfolk a place where everyone has access to life's essentials. We're going to start tonight with Julie Chaplin from the Hanseatic Union. Now, I'm pretty sure that Julie needs no introduction, but I'm going to give her one anyway. Julie has spent her career working in education and community projects, helping those who are facing barriers to thriving. She is currently the project lead for the Hanseatic Union, a charity local to Lynn that works with multiracial staff to meet the needs of those in our community. They provide information, advice and guidance, long-term support, English classes and a determination to meet the client's needs, whatever that may be. Julie, over to you.
Make sure that everybody in our society, our small society, was out, it was the feeling of alienation, that we didn't have a place in society. We got places at grammar school, but in grammar school we didn't fit in because we were clever, but the people in our school didn't like us because we were poor. And in our poor area, they didn't like us because we were extra poor, and then that kind of made them worry they were going to end up like us one day. So you come out of that experience kind of scarred and feeling alone, and it's been part of my whole career has been to try to make sure that people don't feel that feeling, don't feel that there's nobody there and that you've got to go through it all. So we started off sort of the work with migrants because I could teach, so we started teaching English as a second language. That was in 2013, and then slowly over time we got funding for different projects. Whatever the clients said they needed, we went out and found some money to help them. Jobs, all of those kind of things. We're now working with 38 nationalities. That's just King's Lynn, 38 nationalities. We do work with British people, because I'm British and I can only speak that one language. But the rest of the staff and the trustees are all migrants or refugees and have lived experience of alienation, being ostracised, feeling like the other. And so everything we do has got that underpinning thing that we want that to change in people. So, in our governance document, we say we want to overcome barriers to thriving, and we also say to live autonomously, which means to have your own agency. And one of the things, obviously the benefit system is amazing in many ways, because it's there to catch people when they're falling, but unfortunately it doesn't help the people who are on the benefits to feel that they have got any agency. They are mostly terrified that that's going to be taken away. So, for example, when Keir Starmer said the thing about PIP recently, in that week, in the first week, I had 3 people come to my desk saying that as soon as their PIP was going to be removed, they were going to commit suicide. Because they have no agency. They are so... You're stuck in a system that genuinely doesn't care about you as an individual, and you can't get footing. We had a lady who came to see us, we had to give her a food bank voucher, and Helen and her team are lovely, and we rely on them, and she stood in the queue sobbing because she didn't want to feel demeaned by getting a food bank. But for her, as a single mother, she is on benefits, but only because she's got a disability now. She wasn't working until a year before. She knew that she was going to have to go to the food bank every single week because she's got private rent and she gets benefits, and her private rent had gone from 500 to 900. The statutory, the money that you get in housing benefit doesn't increase, and she hasn't got a way out of it. And so she was sobbing because she felt demeaned, but also because she felt hopeless and that she had no control over the situation. All she could do was come to charities and ask us to help her. And I know the government are doing what they do, but it's so hard to get a benefit. I'm sure you all know it takes ages. There's still the 5-week wait to sign on to universal credit. Now, if any of you had your money to your property completely stopped for 5 weeks, imagine what situation you would be in. You can't buy food in that 5 weeks, you've got no money. You can't pay rent. You have to ring everybody and say, we're not going to pay anything for a month because we're waiting for benefits. By the time you can get to the end of that, you're broken. You feel as if you've got no worth at all. And you just wait for universal credit. If you go on to PIP, it's assuming we can get the award. It's a 6-month wait to get PIP, at the shortest. And you have to go through assessments. I've been to some of the assessments, and the PIP assessor asked the person who was disabled to bend down and touch their toes, which was so totally demeaning that I could hardly bear to watch it. And that's part of the process to do that. We also, in our helping people with benefits and tackling that kind of thing, we also do SEN tribunals. Obviously, it's a legal right to education in this have to go through a huge performance to get anywhere at all. So at the moment, they're going through a phase of saying no to every single application for an EHCP, which is the ticket, passport to get your education. Every single client is being turned down. So you have to go to appeal. Then you have to go to mediation. Then, usually we have to go to the courts to get you just the first step. That whole process, even without the courts, that takes 6 months. Then, you don't get a place in SEN. Then you come back to me and I've got to go to court again to try and get you a place in an SEN school. That takes another year. Now, if your child isn't diagnosed until they're year 5, they're going to transition into a mainstream school. They're going to be dropped out within the first 6 weeks because they can't cope. That's their legal right being denied to an education. So, very difficult if you're an SEN parent. If you do have money, you can pay for an assessment for a diagnosis. That costs £1,000. If you can't pay for a diagnosis, it's a 7-year wait on the list. So we've got people who are going to have left school before they ever even got their assessment done. I'm not going to mention dentists. because we have children in our families who cannot get dental care. Their parents can't afford to pay for it. I have adults sitting in my classes holding their face where they're in agony and they say to me, where can I go? And I say, try A&E, try this, try that. There's nowhere to go. And that's poverty. Poverty, the definition in the dictionary is lacking the basics of life. That isn't just food and a house. That is the whole of it. The right to be healthy. The right not to sit with your teeth aching one day. The right to be able to go to school and sit in a chair and enjoy your lesson. Loads of the SEN families, because the children are put into mainstream schools and the mainstream schools can't cope with the children because they've got special needs, they get put on reduced timetables. So then one parent has to give up work and then the family are going into poverty. And because of the stress on the family, one partner always leaves, and then you're down to a single parent who isn't working with a child with SEN and then usually another child. And then they've slipped so far into poverty that whether they get school or not, it's not actually going to make that much of a difference. Now we have had a child who was about 8 years old who was seen at a tea table trying to cut her wrists with one of the button-ups on the table because she couldn't face going to school the next day because she's SEN and she's in a mainstream school. I never have very cheerful things to tell you. Okay, immigration. You mostly look like British people to me, but we're a charity, we have immigration staff. David sends his staff over to help with immigration issues. In the last 6 months, we've had 2 people come in who didn't even know they weren't British. They came over on their mum's passport 50 plus years ago when you just got a stamp and brought your child in. They knew nothing about it, went through our schools, had mortgages, got married, did the whole thing, and then they came to change their job, and you need a share code if you're a migrant to get your job, and they were asked for a share code. They said, well, what are we talking about? I'm not a migrant. But they were, and they didn't know. So they then had to go to the Home Office and prove that they'd been in the country 50 years. There's no visa or anything, because it was a stamp on their mum's passport, and mum's dead, and passport's lost or whatever. So you might well be a migrant and not actually know it. And that whole process, obviously our services are free, but that whole process took about 6 months. In that 6 months, those people couldn't work because they couldn't get a job because they didn't have a share code. And they spent that 6 months not knowing whether they were going to have to leave the country that they lived in for 50 years and they'd never even known that they weren't British. They went back to the schools, like Gary Park, and got registers to prove that they went to school here in 1819, years ago. We had She had been to the job centre, the DWP, to go on to Universal Credit, and they either misread a document or she presented the wrong one. So they said that she wasn't eligible for any benefits. She was, it was a mistake. She was in a wheelchair. So her sister said she'd take her in. So she was living at her sister's house with a 5-year-old. The reason she got in touch with us was because she said, did we know any factories that would take on staff in wheelchairs, because she wanted to get out of poverty. She'd been living there 2 years with absolutely no income. The doctor didn't understand or couldn't speak to her or whatever, hadn't supported her properly, and so she didn't have any continence wear, and so her legs were all scarred from all where she'd weaned herself 1,000 times and it ripped her legs up. She was pulling herself up the stairs to try and get upstairs in the house with her sisters because it wasn't adaptable. And then she came to us, we went to the DWP with her, we put that one document right, which meant she could get universal credit, and we then applied for child benefit, which she was entitled to. And it took 18 months to get it. But in the end, the only way we could get it was to get our MP to go to the minister of that department and demand they dealt with it. And the reason they said it was that, and bear in mind, we weren't sitting there doing nothing for 18 months. We were ringing that department every week, we were writing letters, we were resending them the form, doing all those things. They lost the form, they couldn't be bothered with the form, they put the form back in the post. It's all just loads and loads of stupid, don't swear, nonsense. And then in the end, the MP tried once, nothing happened, and then the MP actually went over to the minister, and that's the only way she got her money. And that sounds like an extreme case. That's not an extreme case. That's every day of the week we see that. People in our country who have got the right to various things, not able to access those benefits. We were just talking about getting blue badges. We've probably put 30 people through to get a blue badge in the last 6 weeks. Not one person's been given it. And that is people who are walking on wheelchair frames or, genuinely disabled. So, alienation. If you are a person who needs any help, or if you're just a person in our society, we are all one step away from needing support. If you got a serious illness and your workplace doesn't offer you paid sick leave and you have to go on statutory sick pay and you've got a mortgage, you are going to find yourself in trouble very quickly. If your child is seriously ill and you have to give up work, or your elderly father or mother is seriously ill and you have to give up work, you're going to find yourself in the situation that these people are in, fighting all the time to get what it should be your legal right to have. And I believe that the poverty that has been created is not just about not having the basic things like food and drink, it's not being given any dignity. It's not being easily able to hold up a piece of legislation and say, this is my right, and you've been given it. It's the fact that you've got to fight all day, every day, for every single thing. And for us, that means going to the courts quite often. It means talking to the MPs. It means pulling every single jangly button we can find with every single person, annoying people until they just give in because they can't bear it. And we probably see it's well over, say, 700 people a month, and we're doing that for every single person, fighting and pushing. So once you fall into poverty, yes, you might not have the basics in terms of practical, physical things like food in the house, but you're not going to have any dignity left. You're not going to have hope. Your ambition's gone. You live in anxiety. So what we as a charity can do, and what you all can do, is to be kind, non-judgmental and accepting. You don't know the day that you smile at somebody in the street and say hello that you have literally changed their world. And it's a really small thing that you can do.
Thank you, Julie. That's really, really powerful. And so there'll be a chance at the end to ask questions of all the panellists, so please remember some questions for Julie. And our next speaker, Rev Jon Price, is an Anglican priest, part of the King's Lynn minister team, based at the Beacon Church in North Lynn, and an Anglican Methodist partnership that has served as a vital part of the community since 1963. The church has deepened its role as a welcoming space, providing not only worship and pastoral care, but also practical support through a community cafe, a community meal, coffee mornings, school holiday activities and regular social groups. The church works to make God's love known to all of North Lynn, doing so alongside local organisations that offer dignity, connection and hope. Rev Price.
Thank you. Thank you for the welcome and also for the invitation. And the powerful words that we heard from Julie before about her lived experience, both as a practitioner, but also as someone that's been through the traps of poverty, and that phrase that just struck me at the beginning, that feeling of alienation. I think that's something I'd like to focus on today when we're thinking about poverty, because Julie's spoken so powerfully about the impact of material poverty on us, on the impact it can have on our lives. And we often think of it as being a scarcity of money that limits our options, that prevents us from living flourishing lives. I think there is another way that she also alluded to in that I'd like to touch on today, which is about impoverishment, another way that we can be impoverished, namely in our relationships. When we think of the positive impact of relationships that we have, we're able to do a range of different things. They can advise you, like educating you on a range of options that you might have available to you. They can support and encourage you, picking you up on the days where you don't do it anymore. They can correct you, pointing out when that social drink that you occasionally enjoy has become a habit that eclipses all of our other commitments that we might have. They can nag for you to go to the doctor for that thing that you've been putting off going to see them for a long time. They can also organise, bringing people together for collective action to enable positive change, like we're seeing this evening. Positive relationships can be deeply empowering, and the absence of them can also be as damaging. People may not be aware of the services or funds that they're entitled to, and that's why Julie's work that we've just been hearing about is so essential, to point out this is what I'm entitled to. People with negative relationships can also be discouraged from positive steps. Earlier this week I was talking to someone who had almost relapsed after years of sobriety away from crack, just because she bumped into an old friend at a moment of weakness. Negative relationships lapse into apathy towards decisions being made on a local level. Spend 10 minutes on any Facebook group that's locally focused and you'll see the phrase, what's the point? I'm not saying any of us would use that phrase, of course, or ever think of that. But when the church underwent its rebuilding project, we were asked, what is your theory of change? Which is a very challenging question for any vicar to be asked. What's your theory of change for community development? And this is basically what we came up with. Giving a safe and secure place, namely the church building, and giving positive relationships, namely the people that go to church, people will be more motivated to overcome whatever adversity they face in their lives. This means that communities need to be properly resourced materially, but also relationally. We cannot have one without the other. For people to escape the trappings of long-term material poverty, they need positive relationships as well, to encourage, to inspire, to equip. And with that in mind, a lot of our work concerns working to build links with our community and concerned with equipping them. The overall aim of what we are seeking to do is both to involve local people in decision making, but also in delivery. It is our belief that to have the longest impact in the long term, we need to shift our way of thinking away from some model of external solutions being imposed on the community and away from kind of a model of consumer feedback where we've heard what you've said and we're going to deliver by doing X, Y, Z. Instead, it needs to see organisations and services take a step of trust and involve local communities in the delivery of decisions as well. Because that's representative of what a positive relationship looks like. It's one of trust and empowerment. On Sunday, we had a woman knocking on our door at the vicarage, and she was absolutely buzzing with ideas of things that she wanted to do at this local community yard sale. The idea was she was involved in the decision-making process, but she wanted to go one step further. She wanted to be involved in the delivery as well. And goodness me, she had better ideas than I ever could have. And she was willing to deliver it. That enthusiasm, because she was involved in both the decision-making and the delivery of a community project. This community development approach is at the heart of the RISE model, the RISE project of which we're a part of in North Lynn. That's why we were responsive to the conversation that began here 2 years ago. The police had invited us and a number of other stakeholders that operate in North Lynn to discuss an approach to antisocial behaviour and organised crime in North Lynn that they were taking. And the idea was it wasn't just about enforcement. Enforcement was a part of it, but in addition to that, there would also be the need to build resilient communities. And so the first task involved was knowing what the community thought about itself, ensuring that the issues were listened to, and so a survey was developed that sought to find out people's thoughts on North Lynn, ranging from housing to green spaces, employment to leisure. Every household in North Lynn had the opportunity to respond to this. So in total we had 653 responses. That's just shy of 10% of the population of North Lynn, which is an incredible response rate. Every household was targeted with the survey with a team of firefighters, police officers and cadets, housing association workers, church members, councillors and many, many more were involved in those conversations that enabled us to find out perspectives of residents in the area. In addition to finding out that information about the services that were available to people, there was an even more crucial question that came up about what they as individuals could bring to the table to make North Lynn even better. What we found was the people of North Lynn cherished the sense of community. They valued the facilities that were close by. They wanted more green spaces, places to play, clubs and holiday activities. And while there was that acknowledgement by people that were concerned with antisocial behaviour, speeding, motorbikes and the presence of drugs in the area, there was also an astonishing number of people who, in response to the question, what can you do to make North Lynn even better, responded with nothing. It was indicative of a mindset that we are having to address in North Lynn. One in which communities are involved in the decision-making process, but not in the delivery, who feel that they have nothing to contribute. What an absolute absurd thing for anyone to think, that they don't have something to bring. There was a number of other answers, though, that were people showing imagination and creativity about how they could improve North Lynn, because they had seen positive things already happening there. One of the clearest messages we heard from some members of the community was even if they didn't feel like they knew exactly what they could do, they still had a widespread sense and an earnest want to be involved. There was that powerful sense of potential, not just in the need for change, but in the willingness to be a part of that change as well. So it's still early days in and we're considering how best to present these findings with the public. But one of the desired outcomes from doing so will be to create those positive relationships that organises, that encourages and enables community cohesion to occur in North Lynn. In response to the surveys, there have been a number of community events and activities informed by those findings, and even more members of the community have been involved in what we've done, both in decision making but also in delivery. And we've noticed a reduction in the number of reports of antisocial behaviour being made to the police as a result. For us, that's the result of when communities are properly resourced both materially and relationally. Because of that survey and the training in the near future, local people are being encouraged to identify the strengths in their area, to find local solutions to address the adversity that they face. So in response to the next big question, what is Norfolk's next big step in dealing with poverty? It's recognising the local victories that are waiting to happen. It's backing the talented, enthusiastic people already doing brilliant work. And it's resourcing them, not just with money, but also with trust. Because when we support communities relationally and materially, we unlock something powerful. We see relationships flourish. Ones that challenge, encourage, advise, organise and inspire. That's how we take on poverty. We do it together.
Thank you very much. Next up we have Mark Whitmore. Mark is the Assistant Director for Health and Wellbeing and Public Protection of Borough Council of Kingston and West Norfolk. Appointed to his current role in 2022, Mark leads a broad portfolio of regulatory services encompassing food safety, occupational health and safety, housing standards and community safety. Mark is the Council's strategic lead for reducing health inequalities and improving population wellbeing through action on the wider determinants of health. He is also the lead officer for the West Norfolk Marmot programme, which aims to reduce health inequalities in West Norfolk. Mark.
I have slides because I'm from the council, so of course I so I'm going to talk to you about marketplaces, and I think there's quite a few people in the room who've probably heard me talk about marketplaces before. I'm not going to apologise about that. I love talking about marketplaces, and I think we need to talk about it all the time. So for those of you who don't know, I haven't heard me talk about this before, what is a marketplace? Professor Sir Michael Marmot, who back in 2010 wrote a report, Marmot Review on Health Inequalities in England, followed about 10 years later with an update how we have progressed as a country with reducing health inequalities. Unfortunately, we haven't progressed, we had regress in terms of how we manage health inequality in England. So, what does it mean? It means strengthening partnerships between local authorities, communities, public services, public organisations. We just heard from the Reverend there about the work of RISE, and part of that for me, working with local authority, is exactly that, is getting out of the way of a piece of work and allowing communities to develop it themselves. That's fundamentally, we can't continue with a model of going in and saying, we know how to sort this out for you, and disappearing 6 months later, having made no real difference at all. So it's about that strategic change. We started on this process about 6 months ago. The conversations that I had with colleagues in the Integrated Care Board and Norfolk County Council of Public Health started a little way before that. But as soon as I raised it within the authority, with Alistair and Joe and others, I was just so pleased that organisationally we recognised the importance of this work of helping our residents to improve their opportunity, to give them that that sense of agency that we've already heard about. So the challenge there is we've got to change the cultures, and we've got to change the way that we deliver our services, and we've got to embed that into our policies and programs. And monitoring, standard KPIs don't work for this. You won't see these changes in a year's time. You probably won't see them in 2 years' time. These are generational changes. So they're the Marmot principles. There are 8 of them. The last 2 were introduced in 2020. The 6 came out of the original report. And I think we can see some of the links there to what we've already heard from today. Giving every child their start in life. Enabling people to maximise their capabilities and have control over their lives. That's fundamental. If you don't have any sense of control over your life, you're not going to flourish, you're not going to achieve. Employment, fair employment, and I'm really pleased that in West Norfolk, so far, we're getting a real buy-in from businesses who want to understand more about what they can do to help us be a Marmot place. Those conversations have only just started, but the feedback we have from the Institute of Health Equity is that we've made more progress than most other places in that regard. We haven't really tried that hard, to be perfectly honest with you, which I think says a lot about some of the businesses in West Norfolk. They're really keen to do more, and they clearly understand it. Ensuring a healthy standard of living, creating healthy and sustainable places and communities. So the houses we live in, the air we breathe, all of those things have a significant impact on our health choices. And then obviously strengthening ill health prevention, tackling racism, and environmental sustainability and health equity together. I think probably you can all think of things that you do in your daily lives that can impact one of those principles that broad. So I've talked about this already effectively, but this is what a marketplace is supposed to do. It's supposed to recognise those social determinants of health, assess the extent, which is what we're doing at the moment with the Institute, in terms of understanding what we've got, celebrating what we're doing really well already, understanding where our gaps are, having a set of recommendations that will come out of the report in 2 years' time that tell us what we need to do differently and how we might like to think about improving equity in health in West Norfolk. That's just another way of showing what I've already talked about. Actionable principles, system change, culture shifts, drives transformational process, thinking about the market principles, building them back in. It's a continuous circle of what am I doing, what impact is this having on people's lives, is it positive, and if it isn't, why am I doing it? This is the system change that we're looking for, and this is highlighted specifically because we can't do this on our own. Borough Council and Public Health, we can't do this on our own. We need all of you, we need local government, we need public services, we need the laboratory sectors, education, businesses, and the community. We need you all to come with us on this. We need to understand what's going on. We're really, I should really say it, but I've had the feedback already from a number of people who were at the event in Hunstanton. So we had our first workshop in Hunstanton yesterday. I think there were about 70 people came, and the feedback from that was it was a really great conversation, some really powerful messages that we heard. We've got the unenviable task of taking all of those conversations and trying to distill them into something that we can do something with. But that's because we need the community, we need everybody, we need people who are working with residents, who are really close to them. We're told in local government at a district level that we're close to our communities, and we are, but we're not close enough. There are people out there who are much, much closer, have that lived experience. It's okay, don't worry, it happens to all of us. So yeah, it's really, really important. This can't be seen as something that the Borough Council with a couple of strategic partners are doing to West Norfolk. It won't work if we think about it in those terms. I'll talk a little bit about proportionate universalism. It's an interesting phrase, but effectively that's what Sir Michael Marmot describes as having the same opportunities and services proportionate to your need. Okay, so you design a system that means that people can access the same healthcare services or have the same opportunities. How much of that they get is proportionate to the need, and that's what he calls the health gap effectively. And unfortunately, usually when you're at the lowest levels, when you're in that poverty, the amount of your ability to access those services is usually significantly reduced compared to people further up that grading. Anchor approaches, that's just about us as a borough council ensuring that we are delivering the Marmot principles and we're acting in an appropriate way. It's no good me standing here saying, oh, we've got to change the way we think about health equity in West Norfolk, and as a council we don't do anything differently. So we're doing a piece of work around how we can build the Marmot principles into all of our policy making decisions, and not just our policy making decisions, but the things that our officers are doing day in, day out. What's the outcome of this? What's it going to do? And we're looking for more organisations, again, businesses, churches. Okay. I'm not going to talk about monitoring indicators, other than to say traditional monitoring indicators don't work. Right, it's graph time. Sorry, this one's just so powerful though. So over here you've got Wootton's, and they're a relatively affluent part of West Norfolk, and over here you've got North Lynn, and they're a mile apart. And this is the average life expectancy for females across those two areas and for males. And it doesn't, you don't need to have a degree in mathematics to understand that your life expectancy in North Lynn, which is one of our most deprived areas, is significantly reduced just by virtue of where you live. And that's what's known as the health grading. All of these are one of our wards, but that's the biggest gap, and it's really bad for me. Yeah. These are children in relatively low income families. This is England, and this is the Kingdom and West Norfolk average. So, as a borough, we're not bad, but we've still got a lot of families with children in low income. So there's a lot of work to do. And that's taken to the room, so he'll tell me if I've got this wrong. But this is our households in acute poverty, and there's a big mix there around IPB, rural, urban. Most of our rural properties are on oil. That's expensive. So we've also got a housing stock that is not ideal when it comes to keeping the heat in. So lots of work going on there, but clearly significant amount still to do. So this is our timeline, and we're here. So yeah, we had our first workshop yesterday. We have another coming up in July down the market, and another one in September. Dates to be confirmed in September. That's going to be here in Kings Lynn. The September one we're really keen to get members of the community along to. The first two have been more about service providers. What we hope to do with the September one is take what we've learned from the Hunstanton and down the market workshops we've had for IHE. And have a broader conversation with residents and interested parties in September. These down here are slightly more just sort of the governance around it, so data packs and advisory meetings. Our interim report should be published sometime in October 2025, which will give us an indication of where we're going. What I think I've probably missed is, that's here. This is our priority. That should come soon, apologies. So our priority, having spent 3 or 4 months now, probably longer, just lost in a huge amount of data, so much data, it gets really, really difficult to see wood for the trees, to be honest with you. But what we've decided to do is look at starting well. Okay, so we're looking at 0 to 19, 0 to 25, depending on how you deal with that, and obviously saying and everything else. But looking at the impact of health equity on inequalities on children and young people, that's where we started with the workshop yesterday. This is really, really important. It's one of the reasons we've got the individuals to work with us. They only work with 5 places each year, because they're quite a small team. They've got over 50 market places in the UK now already. Scotland is now looking to become a market country, which is really impressive. But this is really, really important, because having said we've spent months and months looking at lots of data, it's great, but if you're in a rural area, that data doesn't reflect your reality, because we can't get the level of granularity around rurality to understand how that's impacting on health equity. We know that transport is a massive barrier. We probably don't need the IHE to tell us that, but we do know it. So we're looking at that as well. Housing, education, employment. How do you get to a job if you live in rural West Norfolk and you can't drive? How do you get to school or college? How many hours a day is that? And are you actually going to think, well, I don't want to spend 3 hours a day on a bus trying to get to college to do a course, I'm just going to go and do something else. Those are things that actually affect your decision making and your agency and your ability to move into to develop and grow as a person. So, although we're starting there, we had to start somewhere. We could have started anywhere. And one of the things I said at the workshop yesterday is, if you're not directly working with children and young people, I don't want you to feel alienated. We still want to hear what you've got to say. You're undoubtedly working with families who, with people who know children and young people. We'll be talking about other things. It's a start. The Marmot process was 2 years intensive work at the Institute of Health Equity, but it's not a project. It doesn't end in 2 years. It carries on for as long as there is a will in the political and officer and community to do things differently. And we will look at all sorts of things from a health equity point of view. But this felt like quite a good lens to start thinking about the impacts for our young people, because they're our future, aren't they? So if we can get that right, hopefully we'll start to see some changes. I've talked about the workshops, so I'll skip that slide. And what we've also done, sorry, the QR code, but as part of being part of the Institute Health Equity family, we have anyone can join the Health Equity Network. It's like LinkedIn for health equity geeks. But there's a huge amount of really useful resource on there. There's groups dealing with rurality, there's all sorts of information on there. We've created a closed West Norfolk Marketplace group that you can join the Health Equity, and by all means send a request to join the West Norfolk group. If you do, you'll be able to, at the moment, the only thing that's on there, because it's only just gone live 2 days ago, you'll be able to access 90 pages of data with lucky days. But we're also using it as the forum to continue conversations. You can't just have 3 workshops and say, oh, I've spoken to you all, and now we know. We wanted an area where we can have conversations with you so that you can input into what we're doing and say, have you thought about, or why not this? So that there will be a forum on that page, on that group, where you can really get involved. As I say, yes, we're driving it because, as a local authority, I'm privileged to be leading 3 organisations to do that, but we cannot do this without you. So, scan the QR code, maybe we can get it left up at a later date. That's all I'm going to say to you. Thank you very much.
I'll leave it up there just for 30 seconds while I introduce Ruth, our final speaker. So Ruth is our final speaker, so please do get those questions ready. Stokes is the campaigns lead at Norfolk Community Advice Network, where she leads campaigns to tackle inequality and improve access to advice services. Central to her work is launching the Norfolk Anti-Poverty Alliance, a coalition of voluntary community and statutory partners focused on addressing the root causes of hardship across the county. She also leads campaigns on voter registration, cost of living support and advocacy in marginalised communities. Prior to this role, Ruth has worked as a fundraiser and campaigner for national charities including Amnesty International UK and Hope Not Hate. Ruth.
I've also got slides, but mine are because otherwise I would forget what I was going to say. So I'm just going to tell you a bit about the story of the Norfolk Anti-Poverty Alliance, with apologies because I know some of you have heard the story before and in fact were part of it. It's kind of come from two places. Firstly, in 2023, Trussell launched a groundbreaking piece of research looking at why people were needing to use food banks, what was driving the demand for food banks, and asking what needed to be done to reduce that food insecurity. And the biggest thing that they found was that the social security system is not paying people at a level that you can actually afford to live on. So you might be in receipt of benefits, but it just does not go around, the money doesn't go around. Similarly, or a similar time, this would be the peak of inflation going through the roof. Norfolk Community Advice Network declared a cost of living emergency, a kind of humanitarian crisis, with a list of demands to government that would make a difference for the people that we are supporting, but also for the charities themselves, because the voluntary sector is obviously a key part of supporting people through hardship. The picture on the right is a round table that some of the partners attended in Westminster and met with MPs to explain some of what they were seeing and some of the demands that they were making. So the Anti-Poverty Alliance has kind of come from a merger of those two things. We're trying to bring that energy forward and trying to grow it across the county. You've already heard from all of our speakers the reasons why this is needed. We need to kind of keep tackling these issues, put it at the top of the agenda and work together. But there's a few bits of data here as well, snapshots of the kinds of things that were on our minds when we decided to kind of launch this. Through many conversations, we've come to 3 core objectives, kind of. The third objective I'll start with because it's more about the way that we work. We want to make sure that the voices of people with lived experience are being heard in everything that we do. We're not there yet, and that's definitely something that we're prioritising so that we can bring people in earlier into the decisions that we're making. But the 2-pronged approach we've got is firstly tackling these issues at a national level. I think there's real power in using our voices collectively to tell Westminster what we're seeing here in Norfolk and how the issues that they're debating in Parliament are playing out in our communities. And secondly, to look at the services that we've got locally, identifying if there are gaps, if there are duplication or best practice that we can share across the county. And given the likely merger and rearrangement of our councils, I think it's a timely kind of opportunity for us to think about what we want the future of crisis support and financial support to look like in Norfolk. So we launched in Norwich in February, and some of you were at that event as well, and that was to kind of put our mark on the landscape and say that the Anti-Poverty Alliance is here and that we want people to join. We want to hear people's ideas and suggestions of how we can make this difference. Following that event, we collated signatures from people who'd attended and wrote to the Minister about the newly announced PIP and universal credit cuts to oppose those because they are really drastic and some of the harshest cuts that we've seen. And we've also held a workshop in partnership with Norfolk County Council, which is doing a piece looking at the services we've got locally, and trying to identify the gaps and the barriers that we need to tackle in order to make our services more effective as a kind of social safety net. How can you get involved? Very glad you asked. So we're taking forward those conversations that we started in the County Council workshop. So we're setting up some working groups. One that I'm really keen to kind of get more people involved. Well, all of them I'm keen for people to get involved in, and there's some really exciting things coming up around uncarpeted and unfurnished tenancies and social housing where people are moving into properties. They don't necessarily have any white goods, there might not be any flooring, and if you're on a very low income and have no savings, it's obviously a huge financial burden to be able to fix that, and so you're kind of left in this limbo. There are services available for people, but what we're starting to understand and hear from people is that it's not always very well joined up, and some people are kind of getting the support they need, but not everyone is. So I think there's a piece of work for us to do there. But we do have a range of other working groups as well, which I'm very happy to kind of chat to you about, and if you sign up to the mailing list, you'll find out about those as well. We're also talking to the MPs ahead of the vote on the PIP and universal credit changes that are coming later this month. We're writing a briefing and we're going to ask the MPs to meet and kind of discuss our concerns around those. And we know that the child poverty strategy is coming later this year, so we're keen to kind of reflect Norfolk's view on what is going on in our county and what would make the biggest difference to people living here, and what we're hoping to see from that strategy. I think that's it. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ruth. I think before we open up for questions, I just want to add one more point to sort of behind the purpose of the Anti-Poverty Alliance. I think all of us in this room know that poverty is not a new thing. But I think there is a danger that a lot of people who perhaps aren't in this room become desensitised, become complacent, become sort of turn a blind eye to it. And I think that for me, a big part of what we do with the Anti-Poverty Alliance is finding a new way to get, in some respects, what is an old message across. Finding a new way to be a thorn in the side, finding a new way amidst all of the local government reorganisation that's going to happen over the next few years to make sure it stays at the top of the agenda and to show that there are a collection of people, and there's 60, 70 people here who care enough about this issue to come out on a Friday night, that people do care about this and it needs to be at the top of the agenda. If it isn't already, it needs to move further up the agenda. So I think that is a really important message to get across as well, that we need to find new ways to get sometimes the same old messages across. I think that's where this can be a really effective tool for that. So it's over to you guys to do a bit of work before you can take a bit of a rest and enjoy your weekends. Anyone got any questions for our panelists? We do have a roving mic. I'm going to also take try not to break it, so I can hand over to the panelists. Okay, if you'd like to start, what would be really helpful actually, a couple of quick things. One is that you can introduce who you are and where you're from. That would be really fantastic. And I would say, just try and keep it to one, no more than 2 questions, because sometimes this event, you can get sort of 4 or 5 questions, it's quite hard to know which one to answer. Okay, fantastic. No pressure.
I'm not feeling a tremendous amount of pressure after that. So I'm going to have to narrow down my 10 seconds. Okay. I'm Deb Senegan, Councillor for St Margaret's with St Nicholas Ward, which is the ward you're all currently sitting in. A lot of the issues that were raised tonight, government is going to have to deal with, and we can criticise past, present governments. And I do live in hope that over the next couple of years we might start seeing some improvements. But in the meantime, we have to deal with the situation that we have. I'm often trying to think about practical ways that we could be doing things in our communities to actually help people. And one of the things I've come to recently is that a lot of the support and help is in King's Lynn, in the town centre. So if you're living in Fairstead or you're living in West Lynn or whatever, you have to pay for a bus fare to get in here. And if you're on a low income, that can be quite difficult. I mean, a return fare can feed a family. It's and there's a lot of support. Is it something that would be useful to have sort of support hubs in the actual communities where they need to be? Providing housing, budgeting, money advice. I mean, it's also the aspect of people learning a lot of life skills. I think there's a food for thought. I mean, has been incredibly good in helping people cook on a budget. There's a lot of skills that have been lost through generations that help people manage a budget, cook cheaply, and whatever. I mean, and also you go to the supermarket, you can buy a pack of digesters or an apple for the same price. A pack of digesters is going to fill you up, an apple isn't. So you can see why people sort of make those sort of choices. So I don't quite know what the question went there. I think there might be one in there somewhere. I'm going to hand this off before I talk anymore.
Would anyone like to comment on services outside the commission? Yes.
Norfolk, and I'm family service coordinator for Kingston and West Norfolk, and I think I relate a lot to what Julie had to say earlier. I'll come back to that separately. But in terms of support and advice, so we are actually partnered with Norfolk County Councils. We've been given some funding. We're a charity, self-funding, part of the national group Hanseatic UK, but we in Norfolk have to fund ourselves, and we very much nearly went down when West Norfolk Young Carers went bust a couple of years ago. So we really won every penny. And I've got a lot of families I support in the West Norfolk Lives project, but we work with Norfolk County Council. They started to support us again. It's a Start for Life project as well. So family house have been built up. So there's one at North Lynn, but in the ECFS, Early Child Family Service, actually for children take part of it as well. So again, we refer on, we signpost on self-work. There's a lot of anything left I pass on to Julie. I've tried to do a couple of referrals to and so on, but it is there. But I think for me, in my particular role, actually, that referral process needs to be simpler. And I think my experience over the past year and a half has been that it's really complicated because our colleagues don't know. We don't know enough about each other and so on. So something like that infrastructure from where I'm sitting needs to be built, and for people to be aware who can do what are your limitations, who can do nothing. So many people become involved because up and down between early adult family practitioners, they're called, the roles and the titles keep changing for everybody as well. And just to say quickly what Julie was saying, I see for my family, so predominantly the British families as well, but I have got other nationalities coming as well, and they're really struggling. So it's all these issues, and children are suffering. They really are suffering, but we can provide like a volunteer, and like I know it's really people with more volunteers, we need more members of the community to do 2-3 hours a week to support. It makes a terrific difference, and I've been a volunteer for Hanseatic myself for 7 years before I take this role.
Thank you. My question is a bit easier, I think. I'm Joe Rusk, I'm the cabinet member for People and Communities, and Mama and Health Equality falls under my portfolio. On the first slide, when we came in, there was mention, it said, people say, well, you've got everything. Look, you can't be that poor, you've got a mobile phone. Karen explained to me from Tech Skills for Life that she went and delivered an emergency phone to someone that's living in their car in Docking because their mobile phone had broken. And if you don't have a mobile phone, you can't get benefits. So when we talk about digital poverty, it is very real. Also, on the slide, it talked about benefits. There's a distinct lack of sympathy from many people in society. John, you talked about the need for community and friendship, but there is a distinct lack of sympathy. You've got a mobile phone, you've got television. Do you think it's because our language has changed and we no longer refer to social security, we refer to benefits? And there's a massive difference in the use of the word benefits to social security.
Thanks. I'm going to start with you. So, first Joe's question, and then how do we get people who are in this room to be more sympathetic to the type of people to those people that you guys will support?
To be honest, I think everybody's really out about everything all the time. And lose it, it's about to go, there's going to be a restructure at work, whatever, and I think that none of us have got any security. There's all the things in the world. And then, of course, the easy targets are the ones who are already alienated and the ones on benefits. But if you are on benefits, let me tell you, you can get £78 a week as a single person. You can't buy a telly or whatever on a holiday board. It's just rubbish.
Yeah. Yeah. How do we change that? How do we change that feeling, that anger?
You need to break down it's like John's relationship thing. You have to break down the barriers so that people stop judging and looking at everybody else that they've got a golden ticket. You haven't. Nobody's got it good. We've all got it really tough. So I think that what really said the government, and obviously can't say that. What other thing people do is that they target people in our communities, like immigrants, people who are disabled, people who are benefits, and say that all of the problems of our country is down to those kind of people. It's got nothing to do with it. Nothing to do with it.
Jack, can I just follow on from that? So, hi, I'm Emma Poucher. I probably don't need a microphone. Hi, so I'm Emma Poucher. I'm a senior care officer at the Borough Council, but I've worked at the council for 24 years and I dealt with benefits before. Going back to what you're saying about benefits, Joe, I think there's a real problem nationally, but very much so in West Norfolk, that we live on low incomes. So people that are working are struggling. So there's that lack of sympathy for the people that get benefits and are doing nothing. And I genuinely don't know how you change that. I think that is a big, big problem.
I think you only change it by people in this room changing the way they use their language, building those stronger communities. There's no silver bullet for that, is there? We've just got to advocate and we've got to change the way we have those conversations and try and influence people to do the same. There's no other way.
Another question.
Would there be a place for child sponsorship? There's an international charity called World Vision, where you can sponsor poor children all around the world. Have we got to that level in this country? Because it's a good way of connecting people who've got money to people who haven't got money. And you write to them, you hear from them, they really appreciate it. And it's not given to the child, it's given to the community. And the community projects are funded over a period of time.
It's a really interesting idea, Peter. So I think the powerful part of it isn't you are sending money to a person, but the relationship that's kindled in that process. I think there are a number of the points we've kind of touched on already, whether that's lack of sympathy, whether that's kind of a sense of all the resources being gathered in King's Lynn rather than other areas, can be, I wouldn't say solved, but a big step towards raising people out of that trap of poverty is to build those relationships. There is, who here has heard of Dalby on the Isle of Man? Nobody, not even my wife is from the island. It is for me a really powerful place because Dalby is a place where everything is closed down and left. And the post office, the last stalwart of water of that village, also left. So what the local vicar did in that area was he just started going up to Peel, a very long way away, a whole 3 miles, and bought the newspapers every week and brought them back. And through that process, people would just meet up, sit down, grab a coffee, read the papers together each week on Saturday morning. And from that, there were, first of all, conversations that removed stigma between neighbours. There was also a signposting being brought up in terms of other things that people might not be aware of that actually they should be aware of. And it's a really powerful example how actually you don't need to create some new initiative. You can do something as simple as just creating that relationship to begin with. You don't need to throw lots of resources and money at things. Just time is one of the most powerful thing. So in terms of that question that we began with, practical steps in more rural areas, I think just going out and listening, finding out where there are places that are doing things already and encouraging them and maybe even joining in that. That would be my answer.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Yes, I've got one. I'm Alexandra Kemp and I'm a local councillor. And I think encouraging sympathy, if people realised about benefit sanctions, I want to ask the panel if you think that benefit sanctions should be removed or really changed because they are administered in such an uncaring way and they push people into poverty. And 15 years ago when the government was looking into bringing them in, they found the research said they didn't encourage people into work as they hoped. They just made families poorer, particularly families with disabled children. And in this area, we have people that live in fear. They're working, they're doing all the right things, but they have to phone the benefits office every so often. And even if their mobile phone signal disappears, they can be sanctioned for 8 weeks. And that means they're put into debt, they can't pay their rent. And it's appalling this should be able to be allowed to happen. So don't you think that we need to have national changes to the benefit sanctions? And they really shouldn't apply because everybody needs to live to basic standard. As we know, current benefit levels don't really meet the standard anyway.
I mean, I think, yeah, Ruth, do you want to come to that?
I completely agree, and from the conversation yesterday with some of the partner organisations and one of our MPs, and they were discussing the fact that these PIP and universal credit cuts that are coming, or might be coming, are kind of founded on this idea of getting more people into work, which is completely separate from PIP anyway. But they were talking about how can you have a centre, a job centre, that is on the one hand telling you, oh, we're here to support you, we want to help you, etc. And on the other hand has the power to take away all of your income, or a significant chunk of your income. How could that ever lead to a trusting relationship like we talked about? How could it, so yeah, scrap them, put them in a different area, whatever, but we're not going to get to a situation where people can use services when they're afraid of being punished by the person they're talking to. It doesn't make any sense.
I think benefits is a big part of push for the Alliance, and it's something we've made conversations about and had discussions about, and we'll continue to. I'll come to you in a sec, that's right. So I want to ask a question to you, Mark, if that's okay, around marketplace. I'd be good to hear, I think it's an important part of really winning over hearts and minds on this, is some examples of what impact it's had elsewhere in the country. Where, because obviously if it didn't work somewhere else, I don't think you guys were looking at doing it. So what are some of the impacts that it's had elsewhere in the country, please?
So we're lucky in that becoming a marketplace gives us access to an awful lot of resource from elsewhere. We've had lots of conversations with colleagues from Luton who are about a year and a half ahead of us. They've seen significant changes in the way that GPs prescribe. That's not, in my view, prevention, but it's about moving people into services or into things that are being delivered by communities effectively elsewhere. Coventry has been a marketplace for over 15 years, and the thing that Alicia from Coventry tells me when I speak to her regularly is it never ends. I am constantly having to remind people and reset because people change. We all move into different jobs. Constantly just having to have that conversation. It doesn't come naturally to local government services to think about how you might get out of the way of something. But we're already seeing it. We're seeing it in North Lynn, the work that we're doing around pace expansion and supporting the RISE work, that community-based approach to building resilient communities who have agency and can start to advocate for what they want to see in their communities and how they are going to deliver and maintain those communities. I know we talk about Kings Lynn a lot, and one of the things I try and do in the market process is say this isn't Kings Lynn as a market town, this is West Norfolk as a marketplace. But what's happening in North Lynn at the moment is an absolutely brilliant example of the difference that we can make if we think about how we deliver our services differently. We won't see it for a long time. I mean, we'll see it in hopefully a growing community and a community who are they are empowered. What that means in moving those lines on the graph, we won't see for a long time. You know, when you think about if you are if at year 6 of primary school you are leaving primary school with beach, that's going to go through life with you. So it becomes very, very challenging then, and all the the comorbidities that go along with that. It's a real challenge, and that's not to blame that person in any way, shape, or form. That's not what I mean. But providing the opportunities will help with those issues. So rather than say what's happening elsewhere, there's lots happening elsewhere, but there's already lots of really good work happening here. We need to understand it, recognise it, celebrate it, and not get in its way.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm Andy King, Senior Housing Manager at King's Lynn West Norfolk Borough Council. My question is actually about education, of all things. So when my eldest daughter was 10 years old, we had to go through the process of applying for a school place for her. She's autistic, she accesses the curriculum, and we were successful in getting one of the 2 spaces across the entire of West Norfolk, much as Norfolk and Breckland, that were available to autistic teenagers who are able to access the spectrum. She gets a taxi every morning. It takes her an hour to get to and from school. She's absolutely thrived. She's doing her GCSEs at the moment. She is no less autistic. She is the biggest personality you'll ever meet, and a few in the room know her. But there is such inequity of provision for children in West Norfolk, and we could write a nice letter, and we could turn up to the school, and we could do all the nice things that nice middle class parents do. But there are hundreds of Isabels in West Norfolk, and not all of them get the same opportunity. And I just wondered whether there was opportunity within Marmot, and also going into local government restructure, opportunities for us as a unitary to provide a better standard of education, especially for children with additional needs, as Julie has pointed out earlier.
I don't know what the Borough Council can do about that, but certainly part of the point of starting one is to look at that, and that came up in the meeting yesterday. I heard it around the tables. Is what about children like your daughter, and the impact that having to travel an hour in a taxi a day just has on you. About getting to college, all those sorts of things. And the barriers that we put in the way of the opportunities that our children can have. Some of them are geography, some of them are lack of investment, whatever it might be. What the Marmot report we get in 2026 will deliver is what can you do locally, what needs to be done regionally, and what are the challenges for national government. What do we need to be saying to national government? And yeah, we probably know a lot of it already, but there's some real power in having that delivered by the University College London and the Institute of Health Equity, saying we've looked at this is what needs to change. In terms of local government review, yeah, absolutely. Setting aside what you think about, what the politicians think about, I'm not going to stray into that, but my view around this is, initially it was like, start the SMART programme, and in 2 years' time the Borough Council might not exist. But actually, it doesn't matter, because so long as the people in this room and the people who move into whatever the unitary authority looks like, we're giving them a blueprint for what needs to happen in West Norfolk to improve health equity. The best we can do is say, we've done all this work for you, this is what our communities need, this is what our communities are saying they want, that's your blueprint for how you build your new authority. That's a powerful piece of work to give to our successor authority. So I think there's some real benefit in doing it, it's a real challenge.
As well, I think when we talk about alienation, which was what I was talking about, it's easy to think, oh, well, I haven't got a kid who's SEN, so although it's a sad story, it doesn't affect me. But there's a very large percentage in our mainstream schools who are SEN, and they are going to be our workforce. So this is going to affect everybody. we don't get those young people the education they need and the support they need, they're not going to be able to come into our workforce and make a difference. And many are highly skilled, but just need some extra work. So it is going to affect everybody, and we're going to keep on fighting on it.
Something I love about listening to this question isn't what is Norfolk County Council's next big step in policy, or Norfolk Constabulary's next big step in policy, or even what is Norfolk County's integrated care board's next step in policy, but it is concerned with Norfolk, and that is all-encompassing of Norfolk. It includes each one of us. And so actually I've been really encouraged to kind of see examples of this value included in a range of different ways, like resources of volunteers and guiding groups to really make her feel welcome and make her feel like she can be herself in a wonderful, welcome environment. So I suppose there's probably a humble message for each one of us there, that there are things, there are practices that we need to be aware of as well, and that we need to change in other environments outside of the classroom. I know your question was about education, but within churches, churches are useless at the best of times. Welcoming people that are SEN or neurodiverse, actually being open to hearing how we can be more inclusive in that respect would be a fantastic way, and it does make them feel like they are more included and able to step into those environments. Yesterday, we were really touched by hearing someone that was neurodiverse explain they'd been to like a high groups place nearby, and they had a great time, and they were really scared and nervous about stepping into it because they've got learning difficulties. And just that moment where you go, no, that absolutely should not be stopping you from living a fulfilling, flourishing life. As Julie just said, there are so many people, so many more skills than me at the best of times that we need to encourage and kind of, there are things that we can do as communities to resource them, whether that's with the time that we have and the time that we spend, and equipping things like guiding groups or other groups that operate in the area to ensure that they are able to provide the best experience to those participants as well.
Thank you. We might stay there.
Councillor Sayers, I'm a county councillor and borough councillor. I'd like to add on to that SEN provision. The county council is building a number of strategic resource bases across Norfolk. They're planning to build a number this year. Yes, they are for primary age children, but they are focusing the provision for those SEN children. And I know that there are also senior school places for in those kind of settings of SEN provision for specific hubs for those children who've got those needs. My question for the panel, I've got a particular concern about youth poverty. For example, let's use an example here. A care leaver that needs care, has no support, no family support, goes into needing universal credit. That universal credit is much lower than standard provision, I think it's about £100 less. That doesn't set them up particularly well. And then they get into employment, they're on a lower wage. Do you agree with me that more needs to be focused, attention-wise, on that particular age group, so that age group can be, like we were saying earlier, they are our future, so that they can then prosper?
I'll start. I mean, obviously, it's, as I say, we've chosen starting well for our environment work because the data pushed us to an extent in that direction. We could have started anywhere. But yeah, clearly care leavers, as a local authority, this signed up to Carers Covenant. It is a real challenge, and what happens when you come out of care and all of a sudden all of those support networks that are around you have just disappeared, don't they? And so I think we recognise that. I don't want to necessarily prejudge what comes out of an independent review of what's happening in West Norfolk, but clearly carers and supporting carers into employment and into to be able to achieve what they can achieve and have that agency is a real challenge. and something that clearly we have to grapple with. I don't have the answers here tonight as to how we manage that, but clearly it's our focus in terms of making sure that our young people have the best start and they have access to those good jobs that enable them to thrive.
May I point out that because of the Care Leavers Covenant, care leavers are actually listed separately on the equality impact assessment that the council has to do when it makes any policy changes. So as an organisation, as an authority, we have taken our responsibility to care leavers more seriously, I would suggest, than other local authorities.
Oh, I agree with that. We've reviewed those as part of the council's documents, but my question really was about the level of income that they are allowed to get, where, if we've got adults in receiving universal credits, they're at a much higher level, despite the same level of costs running a house or a home.
We need a minimum income guarantee, like Tom Payne did that.
Which brings us back to the campaign. I'm just very conscious of time, it's 6 o'clock, so I'm probably going to just do a couple of quick questions. Michael, you've got my attention. Then, you've got Mike?
I have.
Then Michael, then we'll finish.
Thank you, I was given the mic, so I've got the next question. My name is Richard Pennington. I'm the Chair of Trustees of the King's Inn Food Bank, and I'm also a trustee of YMCA Norfolk, so I'm wearing at least 2 hats here this evening, so it's good to be with you. First of all, we in the west of the county always think we get the rough end of the stick, as it were, in terms of provision from County Hall. And certainly that's often been true. I know from my previous roles as a school governor in terms of educational psychologists and the like, there's some who then they can't fill a role and someone gets someone in 3 years' time to see someone. So that's been a great problem on the SEND side of things. What was said about how long the appeal takes is absolutely right. They always say no. But so that's my first point, that I hope that this sort of alliance working well in West Norfolk will help us when we have government reorganisation. But secondly, isn't the real answer that we just need to give people more money?
Yes.
And I know everyone's hiding around the question, but we just need to put up tax and pay more money, don't we?
Yeah.
I know we're not wanting that, and that's one of the wonderful work that John's doing in North End is wonderful. Relational work is so important, essential to get people to have our agency. But one way you give people agency, put more money in their pocket. That's a political point rather than a question, but that's what I think we have to do, and I just wonder what the panel think about that.
I think what that points to as well is that we do have, especially in Norfolk, a divide between house and have-nots. So, is there more that could be done around that? You've obviously mentioned taxes, there are other ways. A question that I have linked to that panel is, we have numerous successful businesses in this county. I don't see many business leaders, many business people in forums like this. So, are there other avenues that we could pull upon to get organisations that perhaps have money involved, that don't be necessarily perhaps by adding funding, but building skills, etc., etc. So, what are some of the other ways that we haven't really explored that we can make impact?
We do a whole lot of upskilling. We've got some young people in the hall currently who we pay for more than a week to come in to build their confidence. They're 16 to 18 and they're not going to get into the workforce without a lot of support. They're just normal kids come from the education system, but normal kids these days have got no confidence. I also bang on all the time about all of you people who work in organisations. Please try and offer some roles about our school hours. The single parents are really struggling. They all want work, but nobody is offering school hours. And just because you've offered a job at 37.5 for the last 100 years, it doesn't mean it has to be like that. So, and you'd probably take, if 20 people here offered 20 single mums jobs, by changing the hours on your jobs, you would be taking 20 families out of poverty.
Thank you. Michael Newey from Norfolk Housing. I just wanted to pick up a few points. First, I want to agree with Julie about the impact on children and the rest of their lives. Speaking from a housing and homelessness point of view, about 21 years ago, there was some really good research that showed that a school-aged child after 6 months, we're taking on a full academic year back from achievement, and it was progressive. So that person would leave school and actually underperform their potential for the rest of their life. I also agree with the point about universal credit under 25s. Having had 2 children pass through that age group, I can tell you they eat just as much, if not more. And it's just on living and paying their rent and whatever it is. So it's actually a ludicrous system that we assume that under 25s are in some way cheaper to live. I think there's an issue about system change. You know, it's great that there's tons of commitment coming, being visible commitment in Norfolk. It's wonderful that we're all here. It's interesting that we're not a full room and they're more diverse, perhaps. I do think it's worth thinking about the issues which actually require national government and national institutions to change the way they approach life. You know, it's brilliant that we're lobbying for benefits, and that with the trust of trust and goes to country, we've got the evidence, and we can really keep bashing that drum, and we're bashing that drum actually in every county in the country. I think there's an exercise in identifying the other system blockages. Ruth and I were having a conversation last week about carpeting and floor coverings and white goods and social housing. And there's some really good financial reasons why that's really difficult. Well, then we need to change the system. I do wonder how we actually build a national voice across anti-poverty alliances across the country, so together we can be one drum, rather than all going on about what's going on locally in other groups, which is fantastic, but doesn't actually grab the attention of ministers and like that.
Yeah. You're now the head of the UK Anti-Poverty Alliance.
Thank you very much, everyone. Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I guess the way I see I think there's real power in the Norfolk Anti-Poverty Alliance in almost being a messenger between Norfolk and Westminster. And I agree about linking up with other organisations. Completely on board with that. I feel like because we've kind of started out with Trussell and that piece of research is so powerful around benefits, I feel like in some ways, to me, that is kind of what that is. But I think that translating back what is going on in Parliament, like all these discussions that they're having, it feels so remote in anywhere in Norfolk, I think. And our MPs are listening to stories like the ones we've heard tonight. And my tiny gripe is we did invite MPs tonight. In fact, the reason we're doing this on a Friday is because we were told, you know, if you do it a different day of the week, MPs can't come. Unfortunately, they did take a week when they're on recess, so that's kind of on me. But the fact that we held this on a Friday, hoping MPs might come along, we did invite them. We didn't even hear back. We didn't even get a
Wait, they're not going to be
so
so
I think they need to hear the stories that we're hearing tonight. So yeah, but I feel like that is a really powerful role for the Alliance to play.
It is about coordination, and how do we actually do it that we coordinate and then duplicate what we're doing, and how to ask a question, and they're going to say something slightly rude, which is, I feel I have to go now. So someone else at 6 o'clock. So if John or somebody else who knows my email can make sure I've got the mailing list, I'd be very grateful. Thank you so much for listening to the least of this short presentation.
I didn't expect the Bishop of Lincoln to mic drop, but it was definitely not my bingo card at the time. I mean, I think obviously there is always going to be duplication of massive county, lots of people who have lots of good ideas and lots of good meaning. But you know, conversations like this, there's connections I've made today that I haven't made yesterday. That's a start, and hopefully there'll be other connections that are made tonight. We've got some asks which I'll go through in a minute around the Alliance in general, but a starting point is sharing good practice, sharing some of the great work that you guys are doing, which is absolutely fantastic, and some of you guys out there are involved in that as well, so that we can be messengers. We go over to Great Yarmouth and have a conversation over there, because we're Norfolk wide. You guys don't, because you're not Norfolk wide. So I guess it's that kind of sharing the knowledge and roots, and we become messengers. And I have this conversation around Norfolk Community Law Service. We do outreach work, but I say to our outreach guys, well, your job is to find 20 other people who do our outreach. And I think that's a really good start, to be honest. Is 20 people come away and tell 10 other people, and we just kind of work together in that way. Share that knowledge and that experience and good ways of working, so we try and avoid duplication, or actually we try and promote duplication of the stuff that's working in one part of Norfolk and then take it to another part of Norfolk.
Yeah, I think there's some really interesting work at the moment being done within the diocese by a project known as Home Grown. It's looking at the church's responses to children and families work. And the idea is instead of it being, right, we've got this initiative that's worked here, we're going to carbon copy it over here. Instead, the idea is doing network and researching what's already happening on the ground in those areas, hearing as well what else is going on in the area outside of church networks, and then how can those churches work together efficiently to deliver those projects. So in some respects, I guess we're moving away from just service delivery, but then also developing networks and audit maps of what's going on. That's quite easily transferable then into things like the Norfolk, Active Norfolk stepping to kind of do a mapping exercise of the assets and things that are already going on. So I think that's absolutely crucial as well.
Anything else from the panellists? The last question, so any final thoughts about this? Feel free to use.
Going to say off the back of that, everybody in this room could be an advocate for what we've discussed tonight. Don't go away expecting someone else to do it for you. Be an advocate, have those conversations. That's the biggest thing I think I've taken away from the work we're doing around Mark and everything else is everybody can be an advocate. You can be a leader in your community if you want to be.
I would just say exhort everybody to be nice. Because all the people in your community, probably as you're walking down the street, you're judging them inside your head, community. And even if you are judging them inside your head, with your face, smile and say something nice to them. Because you're going to reduce isolation and alienation, and you're going to give people hope. You call them golden moments. And a golden moment inside something can absolutely change their future forever. And it might be you, someone below that brings that back.
Great, what a great note to end on. I think there's lots to take away from tonight, amplification. Once you guys in the room, you're engaged in this, you're here tonight, and that proves it. But let's go away and think about who we can spread the knowledge with, who we can be nice to, who we can convince to be nice to other people. Can I just end by just saying a few thank yous for this evening, and then just a couple of asks to leave you with. But can we just start by thanking our panelists? Every single one of you has brought something different to this debate tonight, this discussion tonight. It's been really, really fantastic, and also really different to how it worked in Norwich, which is really great as well. It's been a fantastic couple of hours. Can I add an extra thanks to Ruth for being behind the event tonight, but can we thank some of the other organising team who have made it happen, Kingsland and West Norfolk Borough Council, in particular Judith Berry and Rebecca Bensley-Mills, Kingsland Food Bank, Alan Gilbert, and Perfectly Trust Joy Wiley and Paul Hall. Round of applause for them, please. So a couple of asks before you leave. We've got the building for a while yet, so please, if you want to have a conversation with anyone, please do so. We've got a couple of boards out there to add your comments to. Questions like, what challenges are facing your community, and what is your message to government? I think that just applies both nationally, but also really applies locally with what's going to be happening over the next couple of years. Do make sure you sign up to the Anti-Poverty Alliance for updates. It's very much in the early stages, so we are still very much working out what it looks like, what the future of the Alliance looks like, and where we can best use the kind of power and the energy in this room and other rooms. But can I just add thanks ever so much to you guys for turning out tonight. It is a big ask on a Friday evening. It's been a really great couple of hours, and let's see what happens next and keep up the good fight.
Thank you.